Kia ora koutou, nau mai, haere mai, ki tēnei kaupapa. Hello everyone and welcome to this Me Tiaki Manataonga webinar about teaching climate action with Wellington Zoo. We are recording this webinar as usual and we will post it on our YouTube channel and our website for those people who are not able to make the live event. And if you have a comment or a question that you'd like to pose to our speakers today, just type it in the chat and we'll come to it at the end of the presentation. So we'll begin with a karakia and then I'll introduce our speakers. He karakia timatanga. Whakatakati hau ki te uru, whakatakati hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei, mauri ora. Well, I'm delighted to welcome our two presenters today. Charles Wilson is team leader of learning at Wellington Zoo. He is an experienced educator in informal and formal contexts, and he is focused on student-centered learning. And he's committed to inspiring and empowering ākonga to take action for the environment. Tim Dench is an educator in the learning team at Wellington Zoo. He has a history in zookeeping and informal education from around Australia and New Zealand, and he is passionate about engaging ākonga for all ages about the natural world and helping them to act for our planet. Today, they're going to give us an overview of their mahi right across the zoo and give us some insights into the many ways that they share their climate action messages with students and visitors. So welcome to you both. Over to you.
Kia ora. Thank you so much for that introduction, Helen. So welcome. Thank you again for joining us today to hear about how we approach climate change and climate action at Wellington Zoo. Climate change is such a big issue and it can feel a little overwhelming, as much for those of us trying to guide young people towards ways we can help, as it is for those young people who can see their future changing and who can feel powerless to do anything about it. So just before we begin, a little disclaimer, we don't claim to be the world experts on this, but we're really keen to share with you what we do to help our visitors, our ākonga and the rangatahi to take action for the environment. As we all know, young people are very well aware of the effects of climate change and the challenges they face. What they don't always know is if the adults are also responding to climate change and actually taking meaningful action to help them as well. So who are we? Helen's introduced us already. So this is me, I'm Charles, and I'm the team leader learning at Wellington Zoo. And we've also got with us Tim. Kia ora, Tim.
Kia ora, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. It's really exciting to have a bit of a chat.
Awesome. And so this is a photo from a day we actually spent planting with a community project in Tawa here in Wellington. That we'll mention a bit later on as well. So that's us doing a little bit of action for the environment. All right, so why Wellington Zoo? Why climate action? Well, here's a bit about how we approach it. Climate change can be, a really scary topic, as I said, and for many of us, it just seems too big and too difficult to be able to do anything about. However, we are in an immensely privileged and responsible position at the zoo to be able to take action. Wellington Zoo is a really prominent community facility and we welcome hundreds of thousands of visitors every year. And we're also a learning provider that people look to for guidance on conservation, animal welfare, and increasingly climate action. So we have the attention of thousands of young people every year. And we have the opportunity and we think the responsibility to work with them on this big crisis that we all face. So where do we fit in? A lot of the direction or drive for this does come from the top within our organisation. Climate action is embedded in our zoo strategy and values, which I've got on the screen here, as well as our kaupapa, our guiding ethos, Me Tiaki, kia ora. This roughly translates as we must look after all things so that they will flourish. What that looks like on the ground can be a number of things. It's day-to-day animal care, it's ensuring animal welfare, working alongside our partners in conservation around the world and around Aotearoa, and working hard to be more sustainable as an organisation, kind of walking the walk while we talk the talk. We also work with our community to give them ideas and options for helping make the world a better place for animals, people, and the whole environment. The impetus here is really all about love, not loss. We want to provide actions we can all achieve without overwhelming our visitors with negative information. Young people are often, all too aware of how big the issues are and how that climate change is affecting us, our planet, and all living things. So rather than concentrating too much on the huge negative impacts of climate change, we see it more as our place to focus on empowerment, providing actions that we can all do to help in our own small ways, and then collectively that will all make a difference. So one of the key messages at the zoo around how we do that is around using FSC wood and paper products. And the zoo's partnered with FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council, for some years, and we work hard to embed the FSC messaging into everything we do. So to kind of start us off and to give you a bit of an idea of what things actually look like at the zoo, we've got a little video about that, showing how we do that around the zoo.
We're part of the FSC promotional license holder program because we live by a kaupapa called Me Tiaki kia ora, which is like an ethos for our organisation. And really what it means is we must look after the planet so that all life can thrive. So being part of the FSC really helps us to live that kaupapa. FSC trademarks go everywhere in our zoo. It's a very prominent brand in our zoo, and it's one we're very proud of and very, very happy to promote. So some of the things that we've done in our zoo around visitor experiences, so some of our signage would talk about what is tiger-friendly wood, for example. So this is what you could use if it was tiger-friendly wood, which is obviously FSC based, and this is wood that's not tiger-friendly. So it's a very simple graphic that people can look at and go, oh, when I go to the shop, I'm going to buy tiger-friendly wood. So it links that FSC brand back to something that people love, which is a tiger. I think if we could get FSC to be understood by everybody, that would be saving forests. That's a huge commitment to make. So we have that right through our organisation, through the visitor talks, the animal encounters, our signage, and one of my favourite things in the zoo is our pledge wall that we have as people leave the zoo, and that they can take a selfie with the FSC logo in the background, and it says, I pledge to buy FSC certified product. And we know from visitor experience, if people make a public pledge to do something, they're more likely to do it. We have obviously changed our procurement policies around using FSC wood and timber, and it's really important for something like construction, because when we do a lot of our building, for animal habitats in the zoo, it's really important that we're using FSC timber when we're talking about messaging for protecting forests in the wild. With FSC, Wellington Zoo is absolutely committed to saving forests for all forever.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much, Mel, for that. So that was a nice introduction to one of the ways that we're working at the zoo to be able to help the environment and actually embed that into everything that we do at the zoo. I'm going to hand over to Tim now to talk a little bit about what that environment's actually like here at the zoo, and then he's going to talk a bit about some of the things that we do as an organisation to model the kind of behaviours that we would like others to take up and that our community can get on board with. Over to you, Tim.
Cool, thank you. So yeah, as you can see here on the screen, we are extremely lucky to work with some beautiful animals here, and also just in a really beautiful environment out at the zoo grounds as well. I guess I'll run some quick introductions of who we have here. Starting in the top left, we have Tuatahi, is one of our native New Zealand tuatara. here behind me, having a good look at the back of my head. In the middle, we have Murray. He's our oldest native kia. We have Sunny, one of our young giraffes, and then Janali, young lion male, and of course Goosey, the Cape Barren goose from Australia, one of my favorite animal names in the entire zoo. But as you can see, we've got some beautiful animals here from all over the world, but also from right here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And they really act as animal ambassadors for their counterparts in the wild, because they are all facing serious threats from climate change. Particularly, I'm a big fan of reptiles, as you might have realized with the giant tuatara behind me. Tuatara are being affected really negatively with climate change, even at the level it is now. When a tuatara lay their eggs, it's really important to maintain a stable temperature in the nest surrounding those eggs, because any fluctuation in temperature will end up determining the sex of those hatchlings. And it's a really slight tipping point. 1 to 2 degrees could result in a nest full of male tuatara being born, or 1 to 2 degrees cooler could result in all females being born. So with a warming environment, what we're seeing is full nests of tuatara hatchlings coming out as male, which of course, as you might expect, will lead to potential ongoing issues for reproductive success of this species. So it is something that's happening right now to us and the species we're taking care of. And it's really important for us to try and figure out a way to slow that process down. So on the next slide, there's a little bit of information, I guess, that I can talk about how we are working as a zoo to face those threats and try and come up with some both bigger and smaller actions to slow down the process of climate change. So as well as being really lucky to work in a beautiful environment, we're really, really lucky to have amazing staff who are totally committed to conservation and climate actions right from the get-go. Everyone having a passion for conservation means that all of our staff really have an inherent desire to save the environments that these animals live in. And as mentioned, one of the best ways to save those environments is to slow down as much as we can the negative effects of climate change. So as a zoo, I mentioned we've taken some larger actions to try and minimize those effects. You heard a little bit about it in the video we showed earlier. In our construction and sourcing of materials for all of the animal habitats we build and design, using things like FSC, sustainable timber and sustainable resources, but also recycling a lot of resources. We've got an image here of our new chimpanzee habitat, and this was designed and constructed in 2018, so it's 5 years old, almost 5 years old now. And almost everything you can see in here has been recycled and donated to the zoo by other organisations around Wellington. So there's a nice big red triangle in the middle of the habitat there. That's a big daybed, a massive hammock for the chimpanzees to lounge around in and soak up the beautiful sun. That's all made of woven recycled fire hose donated by the Wellington Fire Department. And even now we've got huge rolls of that hose all around the zoo, and we use it for building things like this, creating enrichment and treats for the animals as well. So trying to reuse that as much as we possibly can. All of the large wooden posts in there as well, they've all been donated to us by Transpower. So old light posts from the streets been donated to us, and we've turned it into a usable space for our chimpanzees. All of the ropes as well have come from Wellington Harbour. So they've all been donated, cleaned up, of course, and then reinstalled for the chimpanzees to have a play on, have a swing around on, and just enjoy the time in there with new life for those materials. As mentioned in the video, and Charles said it as well, we're also making a massive shift to be, as much as we can, 100% FSC certified. It is a really big brand, and it's super important to us here at the zoo, because it is all about saving the habitats of these wild animals. We are also starting to make a bit of a shift in the way we talk about our partnership with FSC, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So those are some of the really big changes we've made in our organization, particularly sourcing and in construction. But we've also made some smaller ones that we're hoping will become a lot bigger, but really it's just those baby steps and starting the process. So if we flick over to the next one, we've got a wee bit of an image, but part of the zoo's commitment to the environment and to slowing down climate change is that we've been really lucky to be Toitū Carbon Zero certified, and we've received the certification for, I believe, the last 9 or so years, and we've maintained that certification for a long time, which is really, really cool. One of the ways we've maintained that certification is by replacing all of our zoo vehicles with EVs. And you can see here we've got one of our brand new EVs, about 3 years old, which is really exciting, at one of our charging stations. And we've installed charging stations throughout the zoo grounds, mostly back of house, so that our zoo staff, if they have personal EVs, they can drive into the grounds in the staff areas and plug them in and help that way. But we've also installed charging stations outside of the zoo for all of our visitors who come through on the main road, right outside the entrance. Nice access to the zoo front, but also encouraging that environmental action to try and reduce the amount of fossil fuels we're using. I've also inset a little bit of a picture here, some statistics. For the past 3 years, Wellington Zoo has been participating in the Aotearoa Bike Challenge, which is a really cool way for us to encourage our staff to take active modes of transport to the zoo. And it doesn't have to be a bicycle. It could be just active transport, things like getting on a bus, carpooling, things like that, any way to reduce the number of cars on the road. You can see here one of the statistics over the past 3 years as an organisation. We have collectively stopped just over 1,000 kilograms of carbon dioxide entering the atmosphere. Now, yes, it's 1,000 kilograms. It's not a huge amount, but it is those baby steps. It's those small little actions that you can use to encourage your staff and your visitors to take a little bit more action. So these are some really big organizational changes that we're making, and again, some smaller ones. Now, I mentioned earlier, and you've seen it all a lot already, FSC is one of our major partners. And throughout the zoo, on a lot of our informal learning, we are putting that signage all around the place, allowing people to see that symbol and stick it in the mind. So as well as all those organizational actions, our informal messaging throughout the zoo is in signage, in the talks, and even in the way our entire team interact with our visitors. We've got a really cool ranger team. Their main role is to walk around, do the animal talks, animal encounters, and engage with our visitors when they're exploring the zoo. So FSC are a really brilliant organization. We're so proud to be a partner of them. And what they mainly do is protect wild habitats for the animals living in those spaces. I mentioned earlier that we're starting to shift the way we talk about our partnership. And we're starting to think more about the way that FSC is helping to reverse and minimize climate change. It's really amazing that they are protecting the wild spaces, but a lot of those wild spaces are natural carbon sinks. And it's a lot of the conversation we're starting to shift to, is that FSC is saving natural carbon sinks, but also putting in the ground brand new plantations to act as carbon sinks for 10 to 20 years until those trees are cut down for human use and that carbon is turned into something useful, you know, our paper, our books, our timber, things like that. So starting to make those little changes and shifts in how we describe and how we talk about our partnerships. We've also installed a couple of little pledge walls around the zoo. It was mentioned briefly in the video. This is one of our main murals, and it's just inside the exit to the zoo. So the last thing people see when they're leaving the zoo is these beautiful animals, really nice colors, but also a pledge they can choose to share and take ownership of those actions. As Karen mentioned in the video, a lot of research has shown that if people put their name to a pledge and if they publicly announce that they're going to start using FSC paper, there's a significantly higher chance that they'll follow through with that action. So this is our mural pledge wall, but we do also have this pledge wall in here, and it's a little bit less, let's take a selfie, and more just trying to get kids and adults to have a think about different ways they can save the planet by taking different climate actions, whether it's something as simple as planting a vegetable garden or making a compost bin, meat-free Mondays, or as mentioned, taking active transport to and from the places you're going to. We do have some chalk boxes down here as well. So if the kids want to, get in there and write down for themselves how they're going to make an action, it's a really nice way for us to just informally let those kids experience it, have a bit of a read and think about what they can do. And again, really simple things. So all of these actions and informal learning are really important for us to give those visitors a really simple way into taking climate actions. Now here, we mentioned the pledge walls, and they're really, really amazing with that research going through. As a small step, they've been really good for us, but they've been really successful for us as well. And we're taking that learning and we're pushing it into our new habitat design and visitor space construction. At the end of the year, we are planning to bring some snow leopards to Wellington Zoo. It's a really exciting time, absolutely amazing species. But for our visitor interpretation space, we're taking the idea of the pledge wall and we're really running with it. We're formalizing that concept. We're making sure that visitors can put their name on it as well, send it off to Twitter, and actually have that as a pledge that they've made out in the world instead of just sitting on their phone in a selfie format. They're saying it to people, not just themselves. And we're giving them lots of different options as well, making pledges, meat-free Mondays, active transport, making sure to turn off the lights every time they leave a room. Simple things like this, which is a really cool way for us to take a simple idea and really expand on it and run with it. And we're really excited to see how that goes in the future once it's in and we have some beautiful snow leopards to work with.
Nice one. Thank you, Tim. Cool. So tying in with those things that we have out in the zoo, those interpretation materials and spaces, and a lot of informal learning that happens through any kind of visit that you might do to the zoo. We also have our more formal learning programs. And so every year, our team welcomes around 10,000 ākonga from the primary, intermediate and secondary schools, mostly from the Greater Wellington region, but also from across the Motu, to take part in learning workshops with us. And they might be on a variety of topics, but there'll always be in every visit that they make, every workshop that we run, we'll always have a conservation and sustainability aspect to it, because that's really what we're about. Conservation is at the heart of everything we do at the zoo, and increasingly climate action is part of everything as well. So as part of that learning, we make sure that those messages are included and that they're strongly connected to the topic they're learning about for maximum engagement. So you can probably guess one of the major ones is about using FSC certified wood and paper products. It's a really easy way to connect to how we can protect animal habitats, but also framing it as a climate action like Tim mentioned. We get a lot of really interesting feedback on that conservation aspect of our learning workshops, things like the student who said that I learned lots about the blue penguin and how they're affected by all the stuff thrown in the ocean. I really want to help them by organising a beach cleanup. And that's fantastic because they've taken what they've learned and they've processed it and they've gone, what can I do about it? And they can do something that actually we can't do at the zoo, but they can get out there, get whoever they can get to go and clean up a beach somewhere. Another student said that, I learned that many animals are suffering. They need our help. And there are many ways that I can help. And that's really great for us to hear that, they've learned about what some of the issues are, but also they've learned a number of ways that they can help and they're really keen to take action on it. We also structure our school holiday program during the holidays around easy and accessible actions for conservation and the climate as well. So it's a slightly different format with our school visits. they come in for the day. We might see them for part of the day and let them go and explore the zoo in their own time as well. With the holiday program, we've got those kids with us all day. So we start each day, we run through all the ground rules for the day, but we also frame them as climate actions that we can all do in our everyday lives, not just while we're at the zoo. So simple things that we can model throughout the day, like Tim said, turning off the lights when you leave the room, really easy. Or what you do with your leftover food, if there is any, what about putting it in the compost bins? Why is that important? And what effect does that have? And those are things that they take away with them as well. So we do all of those things, as well as the things we can't do together, but we can draw attention to, such as using that active or sustainable transport. The activities we do during the day are all really hands-on. They're really practical, and they help create links to the conservation and climate actions that we want to champion by reducing our waste through what we do, and using recycled materials wherever possible. We model those behaviours, so helping reduce our carbon emissions and make it really clear about why we're doing that as well. And the kids are really on board with that. All the participants we have, they understand, they know about those things. They do them sometimes already, but they totally understand why that's important. And that's really encouraging to see. Sometimes we even have activities that are specifically about some of those actions that we can do. For example, we might sing a song about saving the trees and only using FSC paper. And that can be a really useful focus point, maybe during lunchtime, but it also embeds that messaging for all the participants. And we even get feedback from parents, surprisingly often, after the program, that they've had to go straight home and they've had to check all the loo paper, check all the tissues, check all the school books to make sure they're all FSC certified and have got the tick with the tree logo on it. And so that's really wonderful to see what an effect we can actually have through something apparently quite simple. It can be easy to forget how much impact those small actions and the little reinforcements of key messaging can have. So feedback like that is a great reminder for us of how responsible and how privileged we are to be able to do that work. So naturally, we can't do all of this alone, and there's a few things that we do, and we can do them on site and encourage others in the community. But we're really just one part in a much bigger picture of people, organisations, educators, teachers, and others who are working on this issue with our young people, like all of you. So we work alongside and in collaboration with other environmental education providers and groups in the region. And by working together, we can learn from each other, and we can also create community-wide action programs, one of which Tim will tell you about now in connection with our Bush Builders program.
Yeah, thank you. So as Charles mentioned, one of our larger environmental programs is the Bush Builders program. This is a program that's been a staple project for the learning team here at the zoo for about 10 to 15 years now. So we're fairly well established, but always trying to learn and build on how we can make this the best experience for our participants. It's really focused on encouraging environmental literacy in students in ākonga around the region. And it's designed to increase the awareness of students for their local native environment, whether it's the plants, the birds, invertebrates, or just the general overall ecosystem in the space. And this awareness is really important in identifying the effects of climate change and how natural systems, when they're working healthfully, can really begin to minimize the negative effects of climate change. So incorporating messages like FSC, like keeping cats in at nighttime to protect that native biodiversity, are really simple ways that we've included to help outside of the program. The particular focus for the program is given to school environments in urban areas, and I'll talk about how we run the program in a minute, but we really want to give particular focus to schools in urban areas where nature might not be as obvious for the students in that space. And it really aims to give students ownership of a specific conservation or climate action that they can take and take pride in helping and encouraging that local biodiversity. It's really designed as a starting point for schools, and with the hope that they will take this starting point and really run with it and continue these actions, these things we've put in place with the kids, and really make it their own. So the way it works is each project consists of 3 visits with our learning team. So either myself, Charles, our other colleague, and it's all about different spaces. So the first visit, initially, the students will all come to the zoo, we'll have a wonderful day out, really focusing on global impacts and what's happening around the world to these animals and how climate change is affecting those spaces. It's all about think global, act local. You know, it's a phrase we all know and love. When they come to the zoo, it's thinking global, getting that global context of how climate change is affecting everything. The next visit, a couple of weeks later, our zoo educators will head out to the schools and we'll start thinking much more local. We'll take those ideas from a global platform and bring them to their local school environment. Thinking about, well, doing activities are really important for us, getting outside into nature, things like surveying the environment, you know, identifying and finding all the native trees in the space, identifying native birds and invertebrates, and looking at the biodiversity that already exists in their space. The final visit for us is really the meat of the project. During that second phase, when we're out at the school looking at what's in their environment, we also really want to start thinking about how the kids can take action to bring the environment back into their school. Actions like this is what we do in the third phase. Our educators will again go out to the school. Most of the time, if we're really lucky, we get to spend the entire day at the school working with these kids. A lot of the time, what we'll do is planting natives in the ground to encourage birds and invertebrates and pollinators into that space. It's not always planting. What we really want to do is have it being as a student-led program. If they want to do some planting, amazing. But if they want to do something else, like building a pollinator palace or weta motels or any other climate action they can think of, that's what we want to do with them. We really want it to be student-led so they've got that pride in it. They've got that ownership of what they're doing. Now, we've been really lucky with this program. We've had some really amazing feedback to the point where we've had the same schools coming back to us year after year to run ongoing programs. Late last year, we visited a school. You can see it in the 2 images here. These 2 images are actually 2 years apart, 2 completely separate projects with the same school in the same area. They took our initial program. They got the idea of what we were doing with climate action and putting those plants in the ground, and they made their own plan to regreen the edges of their main playing field. And we've been really lucky that they chose to do that with us. It's really cool to see them taking the seed of that idea and really running with it as an ongoing program. They're an intermediate school. It means that the kids we saw 4 years ago have now graduated up into senior school, and they're still carrying this program through the multiple years and cohorts of groups that run through the school. So it's been really good for us. It's been really cool to see the kids really engage with the project and start to think about the things they can do to help the climate. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you, Tim. Cool. So we're going to start kind of summing things up, and then we'll end with a few questions for you in your own climate action journeys as well, a few things to ponder, and then if you've got questions for us as well, then we'd love to have those as well. So just kind of summing up a little bit about what we do and what we think about how we approach taking action on the climate. Kind of thought, we have to lead the way on this. It's for us, it comes from that kaupapa, Me Tiaki, kia ora. It is up to us. We must look after the environment. And so by extension, we must be the ones who help guide people into how we can all help look after the climate and take action. So we have to use our powerful and privileged position to set that good example, model the behaviours, and then help create that environment where young people can use that as a springboard to take action of their own, like Tim was talking about with those bush builders projects. The key thing for us, I think, is that the small actions can really make a difference, even when it all feels too overwhelming. And that's one of the hard bits to navigate for us, is navigating that that climate anxiety that young people can feel very easily, and actually trying to help them feel empowered that by doing some small actions that can actually help them to figure out the way on and the way ahead for them, whether that's individually or in our local and global communities. One of the important things for our actions and our interpretation spaces at the zoo is really asking for that commitment, asking for a pledge. It's that powerful way to inspire action and actually really ensure people follow through on their commitment, because that can be beyond our control. They can say, oh yeah, I'll do this thing. But if they've actually made a pledge, they're so much more likely to do it. So that's an interesting one for us that we really like. And I guess the last one is really that climate action is part of everything we do. When we were asked to do this webinar, we weren't really sure what we were going to say. We thought, okay, this is really important, but what do we actually do? But the more we looked at it, the more we realized that actually climate action is in everything. It's the small things that we all do. They're embedded in all of our programs, in our interpretation, in the organizational structure and the things that we do as an organization, our visitor experiences and the whole zoo culture. It's all focused on climate action. So actually it was a really wonderful way for us to reflect on what we do and realize that we really do this stuff. And, we can be chimpanzee champions. We can be champions for the whole planet as well. So we'll move on to just a few questions for you to ponder, and feel free to pipe up with any questions that you have about these. But maybe if you're at whatever point you're at with your climate action journey, think, well, what can I do within my organization? That's always the place you can start, is with what you can do yourself. So what can I do? How can I encourage others to join me? Is it by setting an example? Is it by putting a notice up or something on the intranet or whatever you have and saying, hey, I'm going to do this thing, whether it's Plastic-Free July, whether it's Meat-Free Mondays, whether it's I'm committing to take active transport to work. And then thinking about where climate action fits within your organization. It might be that you're the person and you've got the best place to do it, or it might be that there are other people, other areas of where you are that can really help with that and make a collaborative approach. The last one, when should I start? It's a little bit like, when should I buy a house? The best time was probably 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. Get stuck in. Everything you do now is going to be really helpful and will make a difference. So those are some questions for you, and we've got Jessie the chimpanzee thinking about them as well. So if you've got any questions for us, we'd love to have questions now, or feel free to get in touch with us later as well. That's our email address there, or you can get hold of us through with the Wellington Zoo website as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. We've absolutely loved having you here with us and being able to share some of the things that we do at Wellington Zoo to take action for the climate and to encourage the young people that we are able to work with to take action as well. As I said, if you have any questions or comments you'd like to make, please sing out. We'd always love to talk to you about what we're doing and what you're doing as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you, Tim. That was a really fantastic presentation. Just so much to think about for all of us. I really loved hearing about the ropes coming from the harbour and being recycled. I love that story. They're going to have new meaning for me next time I go to the zoo. And I really like your public pledge wall. That's really fantastic. And I think Te Ora made a comment about that. He's going to steal that idea and use that in his programs. What I love about you is that you really do walk the talk. You really live your values at the zoo, and it's evident in everything that you do. And I think that's something that the rest of us can really take on board for our organizations. What are our key values, and do we really walk them through everything that we do? It's quite a good thing to reflect on. But we have had some questions in the chat, so I'll just go to the chat. Kirsty has said, thank you for this talk, Charles and Tim, but can I ask, how is climate action echoed in the more commercial spaces like the shop or the cafe?
Hey, great question. Tim, would you like to take this one, or shall I?
I think you can take that one if you want to.
Sure.
I'm not too hot on what the cafe is up to, but
hey, cool. Okay, cool. No, really good question. Thank you for asking about that. You know, you're totally right. Those spaces are quite focused as being commercial parts of what we do. So the shop is run by the zoo. The cafe is actually run by a partner cafe. So we don't actually run that ourselves, but we partner with them. And we've actually just got a new cafe, which is really lovely. So come check it out. But what they do is they are really careful about where they get their supplies from, where they source products or where they source their food from. And so in the shop, it's all about making sure that things are sustainable. So it's all about the FSC wood and paper, but equivalent things for everything else. So you won't see a lot of, kind of plastic toys and things like that. In the zoo shop, you'll see a lot of things that are made out of very sustainable and natural materials. So that's the avenue we take there about being, very focused on the climate within the shop, and to show that those messages are right across the whole organization. It wouldn't sit right if we had a shop that was full of just whatever stuff. If we were trying to say completely different messages out in the zoo, it wouldn't fit in. So they're very focused on making sure that it lives those values, like you said, Helen, about within the whole zoo context. Again, with the cafe, their suppliers, they all need to make sure that all of the food comes from a good place. So, having things like, I'm actually not sure if they do this, but free range chicken would be an example of the kind of thing they might get, or making sure that any of the foods they have are, very sustainable and doing the right things for animal welfare as well. Okay. So that's kind of how that fits in. So yeah, thank you for asking. Great question.
We've got another sort of comment / question from Monica. She said, do you think that climate awareness and action needs to be organisation-wide from the start, or could you see it working where sort of one team, like the learning team, makes a start and then initiates organisation-wide action from there and kind of grows out and influences other parts of the organisation?
Kia ora, Monica. Yeah, great question. Tim, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can take this one. So I mentioned a lot the way we do a lot of our messaging and in our learning programs and in a lot of our informal education as well is all about those small steps, the seeds of an idea that can really grow into something bigger. So as Charles mentioned as well, even if it's someone like just yourself, starting a small thing, encouraging your office mates to switch off the light if everyone's leaving the room, little things like that, getting the ball rolling is a really cool way to start. It doesn't need to be organization-wide from the start. It's really about those simple steps to get to a bigger project. We're really lucky. Jude, it's awesome to see you here. She's in the chat as well, has also mentioned there that we have a green team on site. So we've got a dedicated team of volunteers from different departments within the zoo, named the Green Team. And as you can imagine, their primary role is to look at the sustainability of the zoo and come up with more actions and different ideas of how we can, as an organization, become more sustainable. So setting up something like a Green Team is a really cool way to do things. We've had our maintenance team recently construct a shed that we've specifically set up for electronic recycling for all of our staff. If there's old keyboards that have, decided to conk out, even if they've got electronics at home, bring them into this recycling shed and they're getting sent off to proper recyclers for those electronic materials. Little things like that, encouraging for the Aotearoa Bike Challenge, a whole bunch of different activities. So there's a lot of small steps you can do and work your way up to that larger organizational step, because it can be pretty terrifying and daunting to start from the top. So yeah, really good question. Thanks. I think taking those small steps is a really easy way into it.
And I really love, Mel, I love your comment about the parallels between this part of the sector and the heritage or historical part of the sector, where quite often, you know, a lot of people who are in this call, their daily work might be about talking about history or looking backwards, but, you know, obviously today's history is the history of tomorrow. So I love your idea there, Mel, of actually starting with an action that relates back to the climate, or doing something for the climate, planting a tree or giving students seeds to take back to school. And I think this relates back to something that we were discussing in an earlier webinar, Te Ora, you were part of it, with Ricky, where he was talking about actions that students can take as a result of his programs at Pukeahu. And I think one example he gave was writing pledges in chalk on a walkway in his space. So I think that's something that all of us can think about in terms of concrete actions that students can do as a result of our programs. It doesn't necessarily have to relate to this topic area. It can relate to any topic area, but it's a really great thing to do, is to think about concrete action. So I think that's all of the questions that I can see. Unless anyone else wants to type one or take the mic, please feel free to raise your hand if you want to do that. I've just got a couple of other things that I wanted to ask you a bit more about. I know that climate change is, you did mention, it's quite a scary topic. It sort of can be overwhelming. It can cause anxiety. And I think other areas of our sector who are talking particularly about histories can have a similar but different situation, where they're talking about something quite difficult that can cause anxiety. How do you balance the talking about the kind of content, the difficult content, versus the action, and how do you sort of manage that in a class? Can you give us sort of a bit more of an example about that?
Cool, great question. Thanks, Helen. Yeah, that is really tricky, as you say, and that is the really, really hard bit to do. And so, yeah, for us, it's about making a connection with, say, an animal that we're looking at, and understanding that animal, and then you're looking at what the issues are, but making sure that we've always got, some kind of action that they can take. So making sure that along with the really difficult things, there comes empowerment as well. And that's where those easy actions and messages come in, because once you've made that connection, you've helped them understand what the situation is and why it's such a hard one, that then hopefully you can help them act and give them a really concrete action that they can take away with them that's going to help with it. So it's definitely acknowledge that difficulty and how hard that is, but then switch it around to that empowerment as well. That's kind of how we try to do things as well. Yeah.
I wonder if that's something more of us could reflect on, that sort of flipping the weight of our programs in terms of the content versus the sort of action and response. The other thing I'm interested in, you did talk about anecdotal feedback from students about the types of actions that they've taken. The beach clean was a really great example. And I'm just wondering, I think feedback from students is something that all of us grapple with, how to get really good feedback from students consistently, and close that kind of feedback loop between what you're doing in your programs and what they're doing as a result of that. Have you got any ideas, like what do you find really effective in terms of getting that feedback from schools and students?
Yeah, great question. As you say, that is kind of the holy grail for all of us, getting that really good feedback on what actually happened after the visit and what did they actually do back at school. So we struggle with that just as much as everybody else does. But a couple of things we've done have been quite effective, and they tend to be the ones that are projects or tasks to do that are really engaging. And I know Tim had a really great success with a school that he dealt with during lockdown, and he did a virtual session with them, and they were learning all about animal habitats. And Tim gave them a project to work on, which was to design animal habitats and create them in some way. And the school absolutely ran with it, and the kids came up with these most wonderful designs. Tim might remember some of the details, I can't. And they actually put on a show for their parents, their community, about the work that they'd done and what they've been learning about doing that animal habitat design. And some of it was stuff that really we didn't go into at all. It was about using maths and how they were going to calculate how much area they needed and all of those kind of things. So often it's those really tangible projects that can help get that feedback. Other times it's really, really hard, as we all know, to get any idea of what actually happened afterwards. Anything?
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Is someone else talking here?
Oh no, I was just thinking of other things. One thing I didn't mention with our Bush Builders program, one of the things we give to the kids at the start of it is a piece of graph paper, and we sit them down and ask them to draw their school, and just draw it from a bird's eye view and include what you think is important. And it's a really cool activity because after the third visit, when we see them, we'll give them another piece of paper exactly the same and ask them to draw their school, including the most important bits to them. And then, of course, we get the fun task of bringing them back to the office. Hopefully they've put their name and class on it, and we can assess the before and after of their image of the space they're in. And, has this program actually increased their awareness of the natural spaces around them? And a lot of the time, it's really good to see that, the first drawing they draw, it's a car park, it's the classrooms, it's the main hall, it's the swimming pool. And then the last one they've drawn the playground with all of the bush around it, and a classroom with the couple of row of flowers next to it. They've really started picking out those natural spaces. So as Charles mentioned, it is hard to get that feedback. When we do get it, it's really exciting. And giving kids those projects, like with the school Charles was talking about, that was really wonderful. We don't always get that feedback back from them, but when we do, it's really nice. And it does seem to work a little bit better for us, giving them some kind of task or action to do or activity to work on.
That's a brilliant one, Tim. I love that. I think everybody's going to be stealing that idea now. And it's so great that it's a really subtle but an engaging and creative way of getting an insight into their learning. So you're not, writing a question on a post-it note or asking them in a form to fill out or something. It's a really lovely kind of subtle, creative way of getting that change of perspective. So I love that. It's really great.
It's fantastic. Unfortunately, I can't claim it as my own, and I inherited that process. But
take it, Tim. Take it.
You take it. It's a wonderful way.
We're all taking it now. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, well, and Monica's just said they use cultural maps in their social science. Is that, do you want to just talk to that a bit briefly, Monica? What do you mean by cultural maps?
Sorry, what you guys just talked about with the maps, we call them cultural maps rather than geographical maps. And we use, we talk about cultural maps in a social science context too. So would be a great opportunity to use it as a pre and post visit comparison. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be one of the ones stealing, so I admit that straight away. Here, recorded.
Please do.
That's what these webinars are all about, right? Sharing our practice so we can all learn from each other. So that's really great. Thank you. So I think unless we've got any more questions, I can't see any more questions. So we'll probably wrap up for today. Oh, Monica, yes?
I'm sorry, I just had one other question to you guys, Tim and Charles, about transport. You talked about encouraging active transport. Something that's always worried me being out in the WOPs, if you might call it, at the Waitangi Treaty Grounds, is the impact of travel. There is no public transport. Literally, our closest high school is, 20 minutes away on the bus. So have you guys got any suggestions or any ideas that schools might want to look into, to offset their travel or anything like that, or for a business? I mean, our business is now very much in the tourism business with international students as well, not international visitors, a full stop. So there's a lot of carbon being spent just to come to the treaty grounds. Any thoughts?
Oh, that's a tricky one. It's such a different context to the one we work in. And, we're quite privileged to be at somewhere where it's really easy to use active transport, and people can walk, they can bike, they can use buses. Oh gosh, that's really tricky, isn't it? I guess any encouragement to active transport is good, but when the distances are that large, that's really hard. Perhaps I think maybe what you mentioned about the offset might actually be the way that you could encourage people to plant things, plant trees as a way to offset your carbon from your travel. Maybe that's the road to go down, as it were. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Awesome. So thank you both very much. That was a really fantastic presentation, and thank you, Mel, for popping all the links into all the different resources that Tim and Charles were mentioning during their presentation. So we'll capture all those links and put them along with the recording for you to look at a later date on our website and on the YouTube channel. So thank you very much. It was really fantastic. So before we close with karakia, I'll just let you know what's coming up. So on Thursday, the 22nd of September, in 2 weeks' time, our usual time, 3:30 to 4:30, we have got the wonderful George McLeod, who I have known for many years. He's been in the sector for a very long time. He's got a lot of experience and knowledge to share with us. He's going to be talking about some of the things he's learnt through his many years in the sector working at Rotorua Museum, and he's going to be talking in particular about some things he's doing to support the new histories curriculum. So I hope you can join us for that. And we'll close with karakia. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua i te ara takatā. Koia rā I rongo, whakakaira ake ki runga, kia tina, tina, huie, tai kie. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye. Matiwa.